So this is was not a regularly scheduled Sapir call. Um, we are, as many so many publications, and particularly publications in the Jewish world, we are responding to an emergency um, that is unlike anything any of us has seen in history, and that would include 1973. I just did the math. 1,200 Israeli deaths is the proportional equivalent of 43,000 American deaths. That is more than 14 9/11s. Over 100 Israeli hostages is the equivalent of 3,700 Israeli hostages, equivalent of 3,700 American hostages. There were 52 hostages in Iran. So we are in uncharted waters. One consolation is that we can start thinking deeply and seriously about them. And so I'm honored to welcome my friend and a Sapir contributor, Marc Gerecht, former CIA operations officer, senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, to talk about where things stand, where they might go in the days ahead, and specifically, how does this event connect with a broader picture of Israel's 45-year confrontation with the Islamic Republic of Iran? So, Reuel, thank you for coming on short notice
My pleasure.
to share some insight. Reuel, let me start with this. There was an early report in the Wall Street Journal a day or so after the attacks that this attack had been planned and, in fact, green-lighted by the Iranians. The Iranians later denied it, and the Times reported that American intelligence, I don't know how much that's worth, but American intelligence effectively confirmed the denial. There are rumors floating around that Persian or Farsi was heard among the attackers, the Hamas attackers, suggesting that maybe the Quds Brigade, the international brigade of the IRGC, was involved, but those also haven't been confirmed. So, well, based on what you know about the Iranian regime, what do you think is the likelihood of Iranian involvement, participation, green lighting, and well, let's start there, and then let me continue with the follow-on questions.
Well, I mean, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the relationship between Hamas and the Islamic Republic has grown in recent years. I mean, even Ismail Haniyeh, who is the political head of Hamas, thanked them, thanked the supreme leader for the funding and improvement of Hamas's missile program. We know that there have been meetings that Wall Street Journal report, I think, referenced a meeting last April, which was well known. It was reported elsewhere in Beirut between the head of the Quds Force, Ismail Qani, members of the Hezbollah, and members of Hamas, and there are resident commanders of Hamas who are, in Beirut. So, I mean, everything philosophically, spiritually, operationally, they overlap. So I have to assume that they had a pretty good idea of what was coming down the path. The supreme leader did say, he made a remark before the operation that, bad things were coming Israel's way. Now, he makes those remarks not infrequently. I don't think it's quite like, the commentary that Rafsanjani made, which we didn't see before the attack on the American embassy and soldiers in Beirut in 1983, where he was actually bragging about it. He knew it was coming. So I think the odds are very high. I don't know about American intelligence of what they have seen. They could be just quite punctilious. They could also have fallen victim to a deceptive operation. The Iranians do that. I must assume that they probably picked up this information, whatever they have, through intercept. I don't think we have anyone in the inner circles, human sources. So I'm not sure I would give a lot of credence yet. I think we'd have to see more. They'd have to tell us more. But I think it contradicts the vast circumstantial evidence we have that would lead you to believe that the Iranians were instrumental in this attack.
The if that is in fact the case, and given how successful the attack was, it would seem likely, if not probable, that the Iranians have helped lay defenses in Gaza itself in the expectation of an Israeli incursion. And I want to ask you, because there's really an active debate, even among Israelis, about the military wisdom of going in full force now. The prospect that just as what happened on October 7th was a nasty surprise, that further nasty surprises are in store. So my question is, do you think that Israel is wise to conduct what seems like the frontal assault that is about to come, or is it something that the Israelis just simply have to do?
Well, I mean, I think they probably just have to do it. Yes, I suspect Hamas is booby trapped every square inch of Gaza. I don't know if they need Iranian assistance for that type of preparation. Certainly, the Iranians have learned a lot in Iraq. So I would expect whatever they have learned, whatever material they developed for use against the Americans in Iraq, they have shared that with Hamas,
and some of the things they might have learned would be, for instance, those munitions that were so devastating to American armored personnel carriers that accounted for such a large fraction of the shaped munitions with
yes, yeah, all the types of penetrating weapons. I think they would also teach them on how to put them down, how to remotely detonate them in ways that the Israelis may not be prepared for, that they haven't seen before in their battles with Hezbollah in Lebanon. So I'm sure the Israelis are cognizant of all this, and I don't. Their hesitation is entirely understandable. I think it's going to be a bloody slugfest. It's going to redound to Iran's advantage. It's going to reanimate the division between Muslims and non-Muslims, particularly between Muslims and Jews. That's all going to play to Iran's advantage. I mean, realistically, if the Israelis had the means, I think they would be better off in having going after everybody, to go on offense in Gaza, to go on offense in Lebanon, and most importantly, to go on offense directly against the Islamic Republic. But they simply don't have the means to do that. So they operationally, I think, are in a bit of a pickle. They obviously don't have any Palestinian force that can replace Hamas in Gaza. I think they can badly damage it. They can kill the leadership if they can get their hands on all of them. That is certainly worthwhile. It can fracture the organization, but I'm not sure it can kill it. Fatah is completely incapable, and I do fear that this fight is going to further weaken Fatah's already pathetic grasp of power amongst in the Palestinian community.
Would you, among other things, imagine that there is? Well, let me stay with the Gaza angle. Given everything that you have just described, would the Israelis be wiser to say, we're going to negotiate the release of the hostages. You won this round. It won't be forgotten, and walk away from it? Or is that, I mean, that seems politically impossible at a moment like this, but in 5 years, will Israelis say that was that would have been the wiser option?
I don't think so, because I think it's just going to whet the appetite of the axis of resistance, to use the Iranian phrase, against Israel. So it will be a huge victory for Hamas. I don't think the Israelis have any way out of this slugfest. I think Hamas was fully prepared for the Israelis to go in. I think they would prefer that the Israelis look at what's before them and back down. I think that's a larger victory for them. But I don't see how the Israelis avoid this. Now they can have arguments once they go in. How far do they have to go? I mean, obviously the missile factories have gotten a lot better. I mean, that in itself, all by itself, is terrifying. The capacity for Hamas and Hezbollah to make their own missiles, the type of engineering knowledge that Iran has relayed to them, has significantly improved. It's only going to get worse. So this is the taste of the future for Israel. And occasionally the Iranians, when they're let loose their grand strategy here, and part of that is that they want to see Israel die through slow reverse immigration. The new age is, I think, going to test the Israelis like they've never been tested before, particularly those who are well educated, mobile, and can go anywhere in the world they want.
What a cheering thought. One of the let me ask you about the possibilities that this goes beyond Gaza. I mean, yesterday there was a moment, you might have experienced it, of what turned out to be a false alarm, when it seemed like there was some kind of aerial invasion from the north. But it's clear that Hezbollah is testing the Israelis in the north. There is a vivid possibility of Hamas activating cells that either infiltrated Israel from Gaza or that are active in the West Bank. How do you assess the prospects of this expanding very rapidly to a multi-front war? And is that in Iran's interests? Would they want that to happen, or would they rather just allow this to remain contained in Gaza?
Well, first, I suspect that for the Iranians, I mean, watching Arabs die for their cause all day is something that they can endure that for quite some time. The question is has 2006 does it still have an effect on Hezbollah? Contrary to what a lot of folks thought at the time, 2006 was a devastating defeat for Hezbollah. The battle that the Israelis and the Hezbollah had at that time. It had I think, a very cautionary effect on the leader of the Hezbollah in Lebanon, Nasrallah. So do they remember that? The pain of that experience? And I would say probably for the campaign in Gaza, that's probably going to be the best that you can hope for, is something like that, an effect upon Hamas and the militant Palestinians who simply do not want to give up this fight. Iran is obviously putting those missiles into Lebanon with the Hezbollah for a cause. They are to be used. They're to intimidate, but I suspect they are to be used. The question is timing. Does Iran feel that this is the right moment to let loose against Israel? That's an excellent question. And I suspect the answer to that is no, it's not essential now, that the Hezbollah might not engage full force. It's a fluid situation. Obviously, the Hezbollah exists spiritually, philosophically, exists for the fight against Israel. It's quite clear in all of their commentary. So I think we have to be very careful about downplaying that philosophical motive. I think we make mistakes all the time when we don't take folks in the Middle East, the radical set, at face value. it's a serious error on our part, which we repeat over and over and over again.
Let me briefly stop to say to those many of you who are listening, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and as Reuel says things that provoke questions in your mind, please feel free to populate that box with your questions, and I'll try to leave the last third of this conversation to as many of those questions as I can. Another aspect of this fight is its effects on the Arab world, and what up until 7 days ago appeared to be impending an agreement between Israel and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And there's a sense that I'd like to know your view of it. There's a sense that this operation was specifically timed to destroy the possibility of that agreement by rousing the Arab street in Hamas's defense, by provoking an Israeli response that makes for a lot of bad imagery, civilian casualties. Is the timing fortuitous or not? And what is the right Israeli response that will impress the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? Is it restraint, or is it destroying Hamas?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think you probably have to say that there's probably a division in Saudi Arabia on that question. First, I would say that it wasn't clear to me at all that we had an imminent deal, normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I was actually quite skeptical of that, and I still am, that that's ever going to occur. Whether the Iranians had that level of skepticism is a different issue. So I'm sure that was a factor, and their green lighting of Hamas's actions, I think, was a factor for Hamas too. They clearly let everyone know that they have a vote, if not a veto, in this process. And I think there was enormous naivete on the part of the Americans and the Israelis about these negotiations taking place between the Israelis, the Saudis, and the Americans. I think we sort of forgot that Iran gets to participate in this process. And this is going to be very, very difficult for the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. He does have to take in consideration the views of your average Saudi, which I think remain fairly hostile to Israel. This is going to make it much worse. There's no way around the coming video images that are going to come out of Gaza as the Israelis go in. It's going to be ugly. So at a minimum, I suspect the diplomatic process is going to be suspended. It could actually kill it. In that sense, it's probably going to be a pretty clear victory for Iran. And I would just say in general that the Israelis make a serious mistake by viewing the sentiments of the rulers in the Persian Gulf and elsewhere in the Arab world as being the sentiments of the citizenry below them. I think you have to be very careful about doing that. And in that sense, the Iranians might actually have a better grasp on this. They know there's room to maneuver, room to play with the sentiments throughout the region. And that I think it's probably too much to say now that most Arabs have accepted the idea of Israel. I suspect that's not true. Whether most Arabs want to participate in any type of fight with Israel, that's a different question. But the real question the Israelis always have to answer themselves are, where are the young men? Because in the end, that's who decides these things, particularly amongst the Palestinians. Do you have enough young men who are willing to die and who want to continue the fight? And if the answer to that is yes, then this is simply going to go on. And the Israelis aren't going to get any type of satisfying solution to their problems with the Palestinians or elsewhere in the Muslim world.
Game this out in 5 years. Say Israel has a tepid response. Hamas remains in power in Gaza. Um, and the Israelis look to Mohammed bin Salman, appear to be not quite the strong horse that they looked like just a few days ago. Devastating to Israel, or does it matter?
I don't think it really matters. I think for Israel, the big question before them is when the Islamic Republic goes nuclear. That, in some ways, doesn't change their confrontation with Iran. It certainly makes it a more gutsy process, a more edgy one. I mean, it's pretty clear now that, I mean, Iran is a nuclear threshold state. It's pretty clear the Israelis have had numerous opportunities to attack. They've chosen not to. It's clear the Americans have had numerous opportunities to attack. They have chosen not to. So really, it is an issue of when does the supreme leader choose to actually test a nuclear device. When that happens, it's going to, set off a lot of different other forces in the Middle East. I would expect the Turks to go nuclear. The Saudis obviously want to go nuclear, but they're so far behind. That process is going to take a very long time. They simply don't have the industrial base. They can't buy. I don't think they can buy the talent very rapidly. The Pakistanis have already, I think, pretty clearly said they're not going to rent them a nuclear weapon. So the Saudis, I think, are out of it. The Saudis religiously just aren't that important in the Muslim world anymore. And that's another big mistake the Israelis make. They sort of look at the Saudis as if they still had the religious authority they did when they were, funding Wahhabis. They don't. They're not funding Wahhabis. That's a good thing. But they don't have the religious stature that they did, say, in 1973. So the effect of any type of normalization with Saudi Arabia, which I don't think is likely, I think we overestimate its impact in the Arab world and the Muslim world also. I think it's that big a deal.
Just listening to you, you seem to be giving the impression that Iranian nuclearization is a matter of when, not if. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that there is absolutely nothing that the state of Israel can do to stop it.
Well, they could try to throw the dice, but I mean, the IDF obviously did not want to do it in 2012. I don't know what Bibi Netanyahu wanted to do then. I think Ehud Barak, when he was defense minister under Bibi, wanted to attack. I think. I mean, but even there,
I think that's right. And they were stopped by their own.
They were stopped by their own people. Now, the Americans obviously did a very forceful play at that time to discourage them. So you probably have to credit the Americans there for doing their part to stop the Israelis from throwing the dice. The situation is much worse now. The Iranians have a much more advanced program. It's better buried. The Israelis, again, have a problem of means. They don't have a lot of throw weight. So I think, the Israelis can always surprise you, but I suspect they waited far too long. And
speaking of Israelis surprising you, I think one of the effects that will be long-term about this attack is that it has punctured not only Israeli hearts, but a kind of aura of not just invincibility, of basic competence. Given how much you know about Israel's security establishment, intelligence apparatus, did this attack cause you fundamentally to reassess your sense of Israel's strengths and capabilities?
No, not really. I mean, everybody can get sloppy. All right. The question is not whether you can get sloppy. That's just part of human nature. The question is how you recover from it. Mm-hmm. So if after this conflict, we see a lot of heads roll, in the Israeli military and security and intelligence establishment, then it will tell you that the Israelis are grown-ups, and that they are holding people accountable, and they will go back and they will review their mistakes and they will learn from them. So I think that's the critical issue. If you don't see that happen, then you have to begin to worry whether the rot is deep, and Israel no longer has the political capacity to do the unpleasantness to keep its edge. Obviously, and this is another reason why I think the Iranians were involved in this, is the operational security on this was pretty bloody good. And the Iranians have gotten a lot better with operational security. They've learned through their own mistakes, and they're much better, I think, at assessing the capacities of both the United States and Israel. They practice on it. So I think the magnitude of this strike, its sophistication, strongly suggests the Iranians were involved, and that they were good teachers.
Let's look at the lessons for the United States here. I mean, you sense that, I mean, one sense is a kind of a parallel. You had almost a full year of intense Israeli political division that led to readiness issues. This was widely discussed long before the October 7th attacks. Political dysfunction, bureaucratic sclerosis, eye off the ball, and complacency. All of this seems to apply to the United States right now. And so, talking to American policymakers, what is the big lesson that they should be drawing from what just happened to the Israelis? Because, I mean, it feels like if this could happen to the SEAL Team 6 of the West, Israel, we're like the police of Uvalde, Texas. I mean, so it seems to me. Are you as apprehensive are you apprehensive that something similar, albeit in a very different way, could happen quickly in the United States?
Well, the United States has the large philosophical question to answer, and that is, does it want to even pretend to maintain a form of American hegemony? And so far, I think the answer to that is no, not really. So, obviously, we have a growing opposition to American interventionism in the Republican Party. The Republican Party is becoming very unreliable. The Democratic Party, the strand of liberal internationalism is not the strongest strand within the Democratic Party. It's done, decently on the issue of the war in Ukraine, but it's certainly not what I would describe as a muscular party comfortable with intervention. The White House's response on the issue of Iran after the attack from Gaza, has not been encouraging. So they are reluctant to
Can you say another word about that last line? It has not been encouraging. Specifically, why?
They should have come out and said clearly, loudly, that the ties between Hamas and the Islamic Republic are damning. They could take a much more aggressive posture towards Iran. I don't think they've given up the hope. I would describe it as an illusion, if not a delusion, that something will break their way on the nuclear question, and that maybe, just possibly, they can continue to try to buy off the supreme leader's nuclear ambitions, that they won't get a nuclear detonation, a test, at least before the presidential elections. So I don't think fundamentally their attitude towards the Islamic Republic has changed because of this conflict. That might change, but I think it's extremely difficult for them to go there. I don't think you get anywhere until the Americans say to themselves, listen, we are not going to stop the Iranian nuclear program, and then try to build a new policy around that. My preference would be for the United States to actually preempt. But, I've been arguing the case for American preemption against the Iranian nuclear program since 2002, obviously with no success. So I think it's pretty clear the Americans just don't want to do it. It's a bipartisan reflex. So I don't think you're going to get a coherent American Iran policy until you can make it a bipartisan Iran policy. Now, I would prefer that bipartisan policy not be a policy of appeasement. But this is an open question. I don't think the Americans have a greater desire yet to go back into the Middle East seriously. Now, the good news is the American position in the Middle East is actually it's actually decent. And the question for the Americans is, do they want to apply a bit more muscle? But obviously, the shadow of Iraq and Afghanistan hang over everything that we do. And I don't yet detect a really serious desire for the United States to get serious about cornering the Islamic Republic, punishing it for its misdeeds.
Last question for me before we go to the many questions from the audience. You've got 350 people on this call. I suspect that the overwhelming majority are very concerned and engaged North American Jews. Any thoughts for what they should be doing at a moment like this, other than thoughts and prayers?
Well, I the real issue, like I said before, is does the United States want to be again an interventionist power? So you've got to make that argument, and it's a tough argument to make. Americans historically have had problems with intervention. You might even say that post World War II, America is sort of a blip. So if the United States, if you can make arguments for why sometimes it is absolutely essential for the United States to intervene with military muscle, that the world is better off, and yes, there'll be prices to be paid, but the price for not doing it is far greater. So that's the argument. Israel is a subset of that argument. Iran is a subset of that argument. I would argue they're important subsets. But you have to get the larger strategic question answered correctly. And until you do that, you're not going to have an Israeli exception. It just won't happen.
Abby Schachter offers a suggestion. She says one recommendation for an Israeli goal: Israel creates a no man's land buffer zone between Israel and Gaza. Should the Israelis do the same on the northern border? I guess going back to the pre-2000 withdrawal. What do you think about that?
Well, technically, there was a no man's land set up around Gaza before this happened. Yeah. What's striking is that the IDF was so unprepared for a direct frontal assault. They just didn't foresee it happening. I'm not. The same is true effectively with the topography and the north around Lebanon. The issue is the first and biggest issue is the missiles, and that's tough because Hezbollah has so many of them. Even if the Israelis go in there fairly quickly, and Hezbollah has a great deal of difficulty shooting them all off, and I think that's a real concern for them, that they actually just don't have the capacity to shoot off as many missiles as they have. It's still a big problem because unless you're able to occupy that land for an extended period of time, which the Israelis are not, then they just restockpile. So it's a quandary.
Ronald Levy asks, do you see kidnapping, eliminating Hamas leadership in Qatar as a possibility or desired option?
Um, well, I mean, that do the Israelis have the capacity? I mean, so they certainly have shown a desire, a volition to go out abroad and to kill Palestinians. They've done that on a few occasions. Um, eliminating individuals who are critical to an organization is always essential. That's why the Americans had, for years, have been going around and killing um, um, Islamic militants connected to Al Qaeda. Um, is it going to solve their problem? No, but I mean, the Israelis, I think, are of the view now, and perhaps they've actually been of this view for quite some time, that they don't get to solve their problems. And that's the whole idea behind, regularly mowing the lawn, as they say. So I think that's the best situation they can hope for, is that, they keep their opponents off their feet. Certainly an aspect of that is to kill leadership.
Zachary Weinstein wants to know, why can't Israel defeat Gaza entirely from the air without a ground invasion?
It just never works that way. I mean, air power just doesn't have that reach and depth. I mean, Americans have been addicted to air power. I think it's fair to say that it has never given the results on the ground that you would want. There is just no substitute from going, house to house. It's how you clear an area. So, um, and the other thing, if you do saturated bombing, um, you are going to have a lot of civilian casualties.
Um, let's see. Um, if the intelligence was insufficient about this attack, how can we trust the intelligence relating to Iran's breakout of a nuclear weapon? I suspect that answers itself, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I think it's fair to say, if you look at the history of folks developing nuclear weapons, that at no time did the CIA have precise information, with the exception of the British, about when that was going to happen. So the notion, if you talk to senior administration officials today, they'll say that there still is a red line for the United States, and that red line is the construction of a nuclear weapon. Well, historically, we know that that actually means there is no red line, because the odds of the CIA getting that lucky are pretty bloody poor. The same is true for the Israelis. So I just don't think you're going to ever have that type of intelligence penetration unless you get really lucky. Intelligence is a living organism. People always have to remember that. Like all living organisms, it can be healthy, it can get sick, but there is I think, a tendency to overestimate its value always. And the most reliable guarantor of your safety is hard power. It's not intelligence.
Carla Singer and Gloria Zimmerman ask parallel questions, which relate to the denial of water and electricity to Gaza. Is it necessary for Israel to cut it off? Doesn't it create a humanitarian disaster and ultimately harm the Israelis diplomatically in terms of public opinion?
It's an excellent question. I mean, obviously, the Hamas has stored up um, sufficient supplies for themselves. Um, whether this is going to somehow turn the people of Gaza against Hamas in an effective way, I don't know, count me skeptical. I don't know. I mean, I can see them doing this on a short-term basis, but I think long-term they're going to have to certainly the water is going to have to come back on, and they're going to have to return the electricity in some ways. I don't see that as probably being a sustainable policy. There may be short-term benefits to it, and you might want to do it now and then, but I think in the long term, I don't think you can starve Gaza into submission. I think that's probably not going to work.
Martin Crozel asks, why do both of you believe that in the long run, a PA administration in Gaza or the West Bank will be less threatening than Hamas? Can't you foresee a day when a PA regime does what Hamas just did?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Fatah, which is the lead organization of the PLO, has had many very, very bad moments. And I think it's fair to say the Israelis often view them as unreliable. They have been involved in operations in the past which have killed Israelis. I think their sentiments are always in doubt. But, as the PA has proven on the West Bank, Fatah is less toxic to the Israelis than Hamas is. They're just weak and they're corrupt. And it's very much in doubt, what their real standing is. We don't know that with Hamas either, but we do know the last time there were free elections in 2000, legislative elections in 2006, Hamas won.
James Shapiro notes that the U.S. has placed at least one carrier group, possibly two, in the Eastern Mediterranean. Under what circumstances do you think the U.S. would actually use force directly?
Excellent question. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, I have a hard time seeing the American Navy being unleashed if Hezbollah starts shooting missiles at Israel. But maybe it's possible. But I don't know. I think that's put out there to, in theory, intimidate. But if it's put out there and something does happen and we don't use it, then we will look even worse. So I don't know. I mean, that's a question for Joe Biden. I don't know. It's unclear to me.
Ellen Hyman asks, what, in your opinion, constitutes an Israeli victory under these difficult circumstances? 1973 war ended in victory for Israel and paradigm shifts in the region. What could be the victory here?
I don't think they're going to get any satisfying victory out of this. I think the best they can hope for is they obliterate the Hamas leadership. They take out most of the missile stockpiles. They destroy the factories, and then they call it a day. But it's going to be ugly. I think it's fair to say that the Israelis should anticipate, Western opinion, European opinion, global opinion, whatever you want to describe it, as a fluid, and it could easily go against them.
Marcelo Pachman wants to know, how is the hostage situation going to affect Israeli actions, and how do you think of them in terms of an exchange of prisoners, or will it stop Israel's hand? Talk to us about the hostage crisis.
I mean, again, it's a good question. I mean, the Israelis obviously have a history of doing a lot to save hostages. I would argue probably too much. In this situation, may be different. I mean, I obviously you cannot conduct any type of effective military operation in Gaza if your hands are tied because of the hostages. So operationally, the IDF may have to just assume that all these people are dead. That doesn't mean they won't try to save them if they can get the intelligence, the information to save them, but that's going to be very, very tough. So I think they're probably going to have to operate on the assumption they can't save any of
them. One of the questions here, which I think is a good one, is yes, to what extent is the $6 billion released to Iran? To what extent did the $6 billion released to Iran play into this conflict? Do you believe the U.S. can claw back those funds? If not, how can the U.S. monitor the use of those funds?
I don't think the $6 billion probably had any effect on Iranian behavior vis-a-vis this. I mean, it's a mystery, and the Americans obviously gave that money, 1.2 billion per hostage, because they wanted it to be a foretaste of a new nuclear understanding of diplomacy that would essentially buy off the supreme leader's longstanding appetite for developing a nuclear weapon. So, and I don't think, as I said, I don't think they're over that hope. But I doubt it had any effect on the level of support or whatever greenlighting the Islamic Republic gave to Hamas. Visa clawing it back, I think it's too late for that. So I think it's already been distributed to Qatar. So I don't think you get that money back.
Mort Weinstein, in this connection, asks, "Can you speak about Rob Malley?"
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, Mr. Malley did something that was fairly disturbing. We don't know yet what that was, but we have to assume that he shared information with someone who was not authorized to receive it. What exactly that information was, but it was sufficiently disconcerting that his very long and good friend, Secretary of State, chose to stay out of it. So, you know, beyond that, it's really difficult to say. These things take a long time to be adjudicated, and you shouldn't jump to the conclusion that Malley's actions indicated any type of treasonous behavior, or Malley's actions, or even that the information that was released was necessarily in the real adult world damning. I mean, the counter-espionage institution in the United States, the way they handle classified information, it is not always what I would describe as mature. So it's possible that Malley's offense could be quite real, but has nevertheless, in some quarters, been exaggerated. We just won't know until we see more information. But, you know, Malley has a long history, as do many in Washington, of talking to Iranians who depict themselves as being connected to the Islamic Republic, even sometimes former officials, maybe even active duty officials. This the second track system has been going on for some time. Malley just may have been, given his position in the government, may have been perhaps a tad bit too exuberant in reaching out to people that he has known for years and discussing issues that he shouldn't have. And maybe those discussions were picked up on intercept. And so it proved problematic for him.
Merrill Rutman asks a question I will answer. Who is Rob Malley? I'm assuming it's not an ironic question. He was the Biden administration's chief negotiator with Iran and had been active previously in the Obama administration in nuclear negotiations, and going back to the Clinton administration in negotiations with the Palestinians. And he's known as being, I guess, on the leftern edge of the State Department's panoply of thinkers and negotiators. And
I think it's fair to say that Rob has a long history of being sympathetic to the oppressed of the third world.
Yes.
Yes. So, but I would say this in his defense: I don't think he did anything in the Iran portfolio on any of the major issues that weren't explicitly authorized by the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, or the National Security Advisor.
You know, up until about this is a question for me, but it combines a few questions that I'm seeing in the chat. Up until a few months ago, I think many of us were kind of feeling good that the days of the Iranian regime may be numbered. Uh, do you think that with this event in Israel, this horror in Israel, that we should be less optimistic about the impending demise of the Islamic Republic? Has this given it a lease on life or no effect in terms of its domestic political situation?
I don't think anything that has happened recently, which includes obviously the Hamas onslaught on Israel, has made the clerical regime stronger at home. I do think that the women's movement, the women life freedom movement that started with the death of Masa Amini a year ago, it's lost. That the regime was able to recover from a very scary situation that they were terrified of, and their counterattack has worked. And in an operational sense, you have to admire their audacity. I mean, here you had a regime that did not want to confront its own citizenry, particularly Persians or Azeris, the two primary ethnic groups, on the streets. They were scared to death of actually shooting young girls down in the streets. Yet they went and they poisoned young girls nationwide in schools to intimidate their parents to get these children off the streets. That tactic worked. There are small demonstrations continue, but I think they see, and I think they see it correctly, that the considerable pressure they were under has been dissipated. Now, that doesn't mean that in the future there's another spark. The regime has lived for a very long time now with a fear of an unseen spark, something that hits them and creates a massive wave of protest larger than the security services can handle. That still exists. The Islamic Republic cannot recover a sense of legitimacy at home, which is one reason why they've been more aggressive abroad. The type of legitimacy and approbation they can no longer receive from their own people, they do get that overseas. So in that sense, the Trotskyite motivation to send the Islamic Revolution abroad is as vivid and alive, I would argue, as it was in the early years of the revolution. It's the only place they get any sense of satisfaction. And it's always important to remember that. It's ugly to say it, but I mean, killing Israelis makes them happy. It gives them a frisson. It gives them that in and of itself is sustenance. It justifies the struggle.
We are close to the end of time, Reuel. I really want to thank you for clarity, insight, perception, and an incredible ability to speak in complete sentences and complete paragraphs as well, which I admire more than anything. I want to mention just two things to our audience, and I thank them for tuning in on a Thursday morning. What I'm sure is the middle of busy work days. There is a live Sapir event coming up next Tuesday at 7 p.m. in person at the Park Avenue Synagogue, and it will be available for streaming live as well. I will be on the stage with Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove and Rachel Fish of Brandeis University to talk about American Jewry, the war in Israel. What do we do now? So I invite you to participate in person, or certainly at least on the live stream. And click the link in the chat or go to sapirjournal.org to sign up for our newsletter. We feel the sense of emergency very keenly, and we're trying to stay very much in the fray and to supply ideas for a thriving Jewish future. Reuel, thank you so much for this hour of your time. I'm very grateful, if very depressed. And I thank our our audience for being so engaged and attentive and intelligent with your questions. Under the circumstances, I hope you have as nice a day as you can. All the best.